About a month ago, I did a video on the villain of Megamind and argued that he wasn't meant to be a deconstruction of nerds, which you can find a link in the description to in case you'd like to watch that first. And I got quite the feedback from it, a lot more than I was expecting actually. But there was one comment in particular I got that stood out to me. And that was somebody arguing that Titan was actually a poorly written villain, mainly because he has absolutely no backstory, and that they believe he was put in simply so that Metro Man wouldn't have to become the bad guy. And today I'd like to explore this in more detail, and specifically use my experience of writing books to see if Hal Stewart objectively is a well-written villain or not. But needless to say, there will be spoilers ahead. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, you probably shouldn't proceed with this video. This will be the only spoiler warning I'll be giving out. Okay, so to start off simply, the basic question being asked here is if Titan is a good villain or not, from his motivation to his role in the story to even how he behaves as a character. And to give the short answer first, I honestly have to say he is. As I talked about at length in my video about Megamind himself, which you can also find a link in the description to, from a purely objective and unbiased perspective, I believe every character in the movie is actually very cleverly written, and Hal Stewart is no different. And as a man who's written quite a few books over the years myself, I can safely say that a villain does not need a backstory in order for them to be good. I mean, sometimes it definitely helps, yes, but it's by no means a requirement of them. In fact, some of the best villains in all of cinema have absolutely no backstory or context given as to why they are the way they are. I mean, could you imagine somebody trying to argue that Gaston from Beauty and the Beast is a badly written character simply because he has no backstory? If anything, the exact opposite is true in that case. Because the audience doesn't need to know anything about his upbringing or why he has such an ego, as his true purpose in the story is to help drive home the moral that true beauty is on the inside, as well as to be the perfect counterpart to the beast. And yet, he's one of the most popular villains Disney has ever produced. And considering how many famous villains they've made over the years, you know that's saying something. And he accomplished all of this without anything being revealed about his past. And he's just one example of that. I could easily list plenty of other animated and live action villains with pretty much the exact same distinctions. But I think I've proven my point here. But to get back to Hal Stewart, when you really stop and examine him, all of his actions make sense. His motivation is one absolutely befitting a villain and does a perfect job of fulfilling his role in the story and serves as a dark reminder of the kind of villain Megamind could have become. And honestly, I don't know if the character gets much more well written than that. And whether or not you agree that he's not meant to be a deconstruction of nerds, he still fits the movie's subversive nature perfectly, being a deconstruction of the underdog as well as showing the realistic consequences of giving just any ordinary person superpowers. And just to reinforce what I'm trying to say here, let's take a closer look at his character. Now, from the beginning, he comes across as a bit of a creep. And even if the audience is a bit, shall we say, weary of him, they're still willing to accept him as just a minor, if unpleasant, character. And he quickly makes it clear that he's deeply infatuated with Roxanne at the same time, which increases his creep factor but is also likely to make the audience feel somewhat sorry for him when you see how he takes that rejection. But again, there's still something clearly off about him. Then he gets infused with superpowers, and though Minion is a bit skeptical at first, Megamind is sure he'll make for a great new hero, and Hal's initial enthusiasm, as well as him responding pretty well to his training, only seems to reinforce this. But at the same time, there are a couple of red flags that both Megamind and some members of the audience miss, which is that it's made clear he mostly goes along with everything because he believes that being a superhero will make Roxanne fall in love with him, and that he had never really expressed any desire to be a superhero or even just help people before his transformation. I mean, even at his most likable, he honestly comes across as a bit self-centered, and if you pay close attention, doesn't seem all that concerned about the death of Metro Man, and certainly isn't concerned about what will happen to the city like Roxanne is. In other words, from early on, Hal seems to be most worried about things that'll affect him directly. And if something is a wide scale problem but isn't likely to affect him personally, such as Megamind taking over, then he certainly won't be worried on anybody else's behalf. And that alone means he most certainly was not qualified to be a superhero because they have to put others' needs before their own. And Hal, throughout the movie, was shown to be doing basically the exact opposite. So then, pretty well trained and full of confidence, he tries to pursue Roxanne again, but still does it wrong. I mean, let's face it, he didn't stand much of a chance with her anyway, but Hal Stewart is honestly the perfect demonstration of how not to try and get a girl's attention. And when she rejects him again, he decides to cope with it by using his superpowers to make himself feel better rather than to help others, as he shows Megamind the next day. And when Megamind makes the pretty stupid move of revealing everything to him because he's just that desperate for a fight, he unlocks Hal's vicious, but up to that point repressed, temper. And if you ask me, that's the moment he truly becomes the villain. Think about it. Hal was just a nobody living a poor man's existence, infatuated with a girl that, at least from his perspective, refused to even give him a chance, and was just generally passed over by everybody. Now he suddenly has the powers of an almost literal god. And that, combined with his underlying resentment and anger at being used, thoroughly corrupts him. Sure, maybe Hal was a decent person at some point in his past, but that's not important. What is that his selfish nature, resentment, and anger causes his newfound powers to go to his head, and he decides to make everybody that he feels ever wronged him pay for their actions now that he can do anything he wants without consequence. Everybody from Roxanne, the city, to Megamind aren't safe from his wrath. And it's only the fact that he's honestly a not very bright person that allows Megamind to ultimately defeat him in the end. So as I said at the beginning of the video, when you really stop and analyze it, Hal Stewart is actually the farthest thing from a badly written villain. Why he wouldn't make a good hero is clear from the start. His motivations make sense, and you can see how once Megamind unlocks his temper, just how susceptible to corruption he really is. And just one final note, he wasn't a last minute addition, so Metro Man wouldn't end up the villain either. From the very first draft of the script, Metro Man was never meant to be the bad guy. But to get back to it, I honestly believe, even from an objective standpoint, that the writing behind Titan, as well as pretty much all the other characters, is a huge reason why the movie is still so well regarded so many years after its release. And for what it's worth, as a writer myself, if an amateur one, I feel the writers did a really good job with him as well. Alright, that's all I have to say on that. So now I'd like to hear your opinions. Do you think Titan is a good villain that perfectly fills his role in the story, or do you believe he's not as well written as he could have been? Please let me know what you think in the comments. And you don't have to agree with anything I said in this video. You can feel however you want about both this movie and the characters in it that you want to. And thank you all for watching. It is all really greatly appreciated. And I hope to see you all next time.